What do we make of all of this? I mean, in terms of the benefits, you can see that facial recognition could actually have significant benefits, couldn't it?
Yes, I think there are loads of benefits. And I think when you survey the UK public, most of them say that they're behind this kind of technology if it's used in restricted ways and by the police at certain events and things like that. So I think we're kind of used to seeing it on the streets and we're used to seeing it used. But in commercial premises being used by private companies, I think that's where the issue has gained new ground, really. And people are much more reticent to think that commercial premises are using private companies to basically mass surveil the public when they're going into the supermarket or a garden centre or going about their business. I think a lot of it started obviously through the police and security, but I think it was ramped up through COVID. And I think latterly we saw with the coronation that facial recognition was used. And I think now people feel like somehow this technology is becoming normalised, and actually they don't seem to have much of a say about it. And they're questioning what kind of regulatory framework or code of practice do we have around this.
So, Tracey, when would you say it is acceptable to use them? Because you mentioned large gatherings. I mean, at the coronation, it was really controversial that people were arrested based on essentially a belief that they were anti-monarchists. And when would you say it is acceptable to use it?
Well, that's exactly the point. It's not really down to me. What we really need is some kind of framework that sets out when and where is it acceptable and what kind of informed consent do people have? Because in this country, we're policed by consent, but people feel that they're not being informed and they're not giving this the consent because half the time they don't even know they're being surveilled. What we're talking about in this particular case is a case with it's a company who created their own kind of network or technology for facial recognition because they were sick of having people come into the store and steal goods. Now, one can understand that. And of course, they want to take some measures to protect their staff and protect their stock. But the reason it was happening was because the police weren't answering the calls and they weren't coming around when somebody reported the fact that there was somebody in the shop shoplifting. So I think that what's happening here is we're once again outsourcing our governance to technology and relying on technology to do the job that some of our public institutions and services should be doing properly. And that's the real issue, I think.
If they can do it better, then why should that be an issue? I mean, it's been reported in The Sun this morning, because of, there was the controversy around the coronation and those protesters who were arrested. The Sun says this morning that someone who was on a Scotland Yard watch list for breaching a sexual offences prevention order was picked up by these cameras at the coronation. Well, that's not going to happen by a Bobby on the beat, is it? It's who's going to recognise this person? So you can see the benefits from that, can't you? That it's going to pick things up that actually in ordinary life just would never happen.
You can, but I mean, when it comes to the coronation, there was one arrest for every 68,000 people scanned. So I think you have to think that actually it's quite expensive anyway. It's not always the kind of cost-efficient solution that people think. The problem with it is that there is no framework or code of practice around this properly. I mean, we do actually have a camera surveillance commissioner in this country, but the government are thinking about doing away with that position. And what we're really finding is that the technology is being used at a rate that people, the public, aren't really comfortable with, and they don't feel that they've really had much of a say about this. I think it's also worth thinking about where this all goes, because a lot of people think this is the thin end of the wedge. The Home Office are also quite keen on police officers wearing, obviously they've got body-worn cameras, but having body-worn live facial recognition now. And I think very, very quickly you get into a society and into a system which is very, very reminiscent of the sorts of things that are going on with China,